Oh, hi! So I just recently saw Moana, Disney's latest animated film, and I need to talk about this thing. I haven't heard many people talking about it, so I don't think it's made a big splash. But it has a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, and people on YouTube videos seem to have nothing but glowing things to say. But I think it kind of sucked. It annoyed me to no end, and I'm going to show you why I think it's just mediocre. Oddly enough, Disney's pedigree for quality films seemed to end immediately at the turn of the century. The Emperor's New Groove came out in December of 2000, and I think that was their last great film. The 90s sort of heralded the end of the classics for Disney, it seemed. Now you can wag your finger and say, hey, but I really loved Atlantis or Treasure Planet or whatever else. But you have to admit that they aren't really classics. New Groove wasn't either per se, but I think it's the most recent and closest that we have. Now, don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed some movies since then. I remember enjoying Home on the Range a little bit as a kid, and I think Wreck-It Ralph and Zootopia were alright. But not counting Pixar's solid lineup, which I'd say ended with Up in 2009, Disney has had about a 15-year dry spell of truly solid films. Now, I'll concede that these statements that I'm making are fairly subjective. In fact, I haven't even seen all the films in that 15-year lineup, such as Tangled and Princess and the Frog. But given these films' impact on culture, and from that selection seeing how Frozen is the obvious winner in terms of influence, I'm going to pass over them for now. But I might see them at a later date. But again, I'm assuming that they aren't considered instant classics or anything of that caliber. So I want to hit on 3 points with this movie: cliches and derivativeness, character development, and music. This segment is going to focus on the influences from other films that this movie pulls from, as well as the by-the-numbers nature of the story. As my wife and I were watching the film, we started to notice a lot of plot points that bore striking resemblances to another animated film, Princess Mononoke. Click here to avoid spoilers for this movie, because I'm about to point out these similarities. There were 3 key resemblances we noticed. First, the disease that spreads across the land because a large spirit has had part of itself taken away. And second, in conjunction with this, how the spirit, originally good, turns monstrous once it's been defiled. And thirdly, the coconut things are obviously the Kadamas. Also, the coconut guys are antagonists of a brief Mad Max-esque action scene. Mad Max on the Ocean, which is Waterworld, so Moana is Princess Mononoke and Waterworld. And a Disney movie, so if you've seen these 3 criteria, you've seen Moana. Congrats, you've done it, 1 hour and 40 saved. Go watch one of these instead, they're all better. Second, character development. If you've seen my Frozen review, you know where I'm going with this. In Frozen, we're given literally 2 minutes to spend with the main characters before the inciting incident happens. Contrast that with Toy Story, a movie that's 20 minutes shorter than Frozen, yet decides to set aside 12 minutes to introduce the main cast before Buzz shows up. In Moana, we have a brief scene with the main character as a small child, where the ocean gives her a conch shell. Moana is the only character in this scene, and there's really no dialogue, so it's kind of a cool moment. And I'll also say that the water animation looks fantastic in this movie. But right after this scene, we get a musical number of, oh man, Moana, you gotta lead your people. And then she's like, no, I just want to go back and check out the ocean. But they're like, no, you gotta lead your people because there's no ocean out there. The island is your destiny. Now, at least for me, if a movie drops the ball on establishing a character in the opening scenes, I have a really hard time caring for them and in turn adjusting the lens through which I see the rest of the movie to care for other characters as well. It's like the first bite that leaves a bad taste in your mouth, even if all the subsequent bites are decent. Like, Maui was a more interesting character than Moana, I thought, but by the time he showed up, it was just kind of too late for me to care. Third, music. I don't think that Disney has done any real classic musical hits in a while. You could argue for Let It Be, but my Frozen review speaks to why I disagree. I actually think that they've been trying too hard with their music for the past few years. Their songs lack the lyrical reverence and nuance that their older songs had. For example, let's take two other female-led Disney movies, Beauty and the Beast and Cinderella. There's something sweet and almost kind, but he was mean and he was coarse and unrefined. And now he's dear, and I'm so sure, I wonder why I didn't see it before. A dream is a wish your heart makes when you're fast asleep. In dreams, you lose your heartaches. Whatever you wish for, you keep. Contrast this with Moana. I've been standing at the edge of the water long as I can remember, never really knowing why. I wish I could be the perfect daughter, but I come back to the water no matter how hard I try. Now, on the surface, you might claim that there isn't very much lyrical disparity here. But when I put music from classic Disney up against modern hits like Frozen and Moana, I see an obvious difference. Vintage Disney's musical numbers rarely dipped into the realm of exposition, or in other words, spoon-feeding the audience story through more abrasive means. And when it did, it was rarely exposition that showed us where the character stood in relation to the inorganic plot. That's the key difference. For instance, when Beauty and the Beast had an expositional song like Bonjour, its purpose wasn't meant to starkly state Belle's mental state. It introduced the town, how its inhabitants interact with one another, and Belle's behavior in relation to everyone else. Belle never sung a lyric about finding her own Prince Charming in this expositional song. In the non-expositional instances of these former two movies, the songs always showcased where the women felt emotionally positioned in the environment they were currently in, how they viewed the world at that time, and the new discoveries they had just made. Cinderella claiming that a dream is a wish your heart makes. Belle's dumbfoundedness at something that didn't seem to be there before. Meanwhile, Moana says, I am the daughter of the village chief. We are descended from voyagers. I will note that You're Welcome isn't too bad, both on a musical level and a story level. It's comparable to Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, and I think they both showcase that stark character exposition in song form isn't terrible when the character is first introduced in any large sense. Now, to end this segment of the review, I have to touch on what I think is the most cringy moment of the movie and the soundtrack. Know Who You Are. So to set this up, Moana has finally reached the rogue spirit, the thing that's been spreading the darkness all throughout the ocean. And she has its heart, the green glowing rock, and she's going to put it back in the spirit to fix it, right? So she's going to part the water to get to the spirit, and the spirit's just going to start galloping towards her. And that's when the song starts. Now, my wife and I laughed out loud at the opening line of this song. Please watch and listen and tell me that this isn't awkward and hilarious.
I have crossed the horizon to find you.
Oh my gosh. And the rest of the lyrics go, I know your name. I may have stolen the heart from inside you, but this does not define you. This is not who you are. You know who you are. And that's all of the song. Like, what the hell was that? And of course, the spirit is like, whoa, Moana, you're strong and independent. You're not scared of me. I better let you fix me and everything's good, the end. Now, looking at the response that this movie has received, not critically, but just impact, it really makes me roll my eyes. Take a look at any song or movie clip on YouTube, scroll down into the comments, and you'll see the two reasons why everybody loves this movie. A, it has Polynesian culture. Wow, so bold, Disney. Samoan and Polynesian culture is so rich and deep. Watching the film is like visiting the island of Samoa at the Polynesian Cultural Center in Hawaii, as well as the other Polynesian islands, from weaving the baskets, husking the coconuts, to the tattoos and songs. Moana definitely represents all of Polynesian culture as a whole. That's 2,099 likes on that comment. And B, there's no romance. She don't need a guy. 211 likes on that one, and then you head just a little farther down. I love this movie because it's not a love story. 201 likes. Why are these considered selling points? Are people just pleased because this movie can fit into a feminist or racially diverse framework? Being progressive doesn't make a movie intrinsically good. And that's all I want these days. A good Disney movie with fantastic story and great characters. I don't care if people say that old Disney was mirroring the misogynistic tendencies of the time. Just like how I don't care that there's no romance in the Polynesian-themed Moana. All I'm looking for is quality in the vacuum of the film and what's in it. Here, let's take this apart. Cinderella was about a young girl being oppressed and abused by her family. Yet she managed to find joy in her animal friends. And by chance, she encounters the prince on accident, who then spends the rest of the movie seeking her out. She didn't need rescuing. She was determined to be happy with what she had. She just had a massive stroke of good fortune, happily ever after, if you will. Belle was a young woman who loved books and the excitement they manifested. But when her father gets imprisoned by the beast, she surrenders herself to trade places with her dad to set him free. And in turn, being trapped with the horrible beast, she slowly starts to expose him for the man he originally was. And doesn't do this over the short span of a 6-verse song, I might add. Then she defends the beast and his castle against Gaston and his attackers. People like to rag on the damsel in distress point, but it's a point that needs unpacking. Because in the case of Beauty and the Beast, becoming a damsel in distress was a noble and selfless act on Belle's part for saving her father. If she were a man, the term damsel in distress wouldn't be an apt description anymore, but the plot point would still have the same resonance. You see what I mean? I could go on, but I just wanted to highlight the point that there's more to old Disney than meets the eye when you actually start to unpack the films. Same goes for Moana, but when you finally break below the surface, rather than dynamic characters and dynamic story, you see dim reflections and hollow echoes of the actually dynamic films that came before it. But if you have a reason that you like or love this film that isn't reasons A or B, and I haven't addressed it yet, please tell me so in the comments. Prove me wrong. Show me what I'm missing. I welcome such discourse. But thank you, everybody, so much for watching, and stay tuned for whatever I tackle next.